Welcome to the Lending Forward podcast, brought to you by Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group. This is your home for real discussions about the mortgage and housing industry. Our hosts are here bringing you firsthand accounts from people at the heart of the business. And we're chatting with professionals from all corners of the industry as they help cultivate transparency around the future of the industry we love. Together, we are lending forward all we know to you. Thanks for joining us for today's episode. Let's dive in. This episode is brought to you by Social Coach, the secret weapon top mortgage teams are using to crush it on social media. If you're tired of wasting time figuring out what to post, Social Coach does the heavy lifting for you. You get ready-to-use content, professional video editing, and one-tap auto-posting across your social platforms. It's like having a full production team in your pocket. And for enterprise leaders thinking, what about compliance? Social Coach has that covered too. With proactive tools that simplify the approval workflow, you can protect your brand while empowering your team to stay visible, build trust, and drive more deals. Ready to turn social media into real revenue? Visit www.socialcoach.io to see how simple it can be.
We're back with another episode of Lending Forward, and today I'm joined with Colby Berger. Colby is the CEO at ActiveComply, and I'm really excited to talk to you about all of the things digital marketing compliance, which I know sounds like not so fun of a topic, but you've got a really great outlook on this entire space. So welcome to the podcast, Colby.
Thanks, Hannah. I really appreciate you inviting me here. I'm excited about our conversation as well.
For sure. And I want to start with your background because you have a not so extensive mortgage background, but you have a very extensive technology background. So tell us a little bit about you, where you come from, and how you ended up at ActiveComply.
Yeah, so as I don't have a mortgage background. My only mortgage experience up until about 2.5 years ago was doing my own mortgage. And so I've spent the majority of my career, about 25 years, in cutting edge technology companies based on the West Coast. And so I've worked with big data companies, I've worked with cloud companies, and mainly on the talent side. And so I've scaled startups into companies that have gone IPO and companies that are publicly traded to grow very aggressively. I think it is interesting because one of the things that I've realized early on is that it seems like people in the mortgage space have been here for pretty much their entire careers. I've got a couple of folks that I work with that they're second or third generation mortgage folks. And so it seems like it is something that you grow up in for the most part and that you never get out of.
That's funny. A lot of us say we fall into it and then we fall in love with it and we never leave. But I think you're pretty spot on there. So coming into mortgage 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, from years and years in the technology space, I mean, what did you think? We know we're a little behind in the technology space, but coming into it, I have to know, like, what'd you think?
So one thing that you're not behind on is acronyms. I thought we had a lot of acronyms in the tech space, but nothing on what the mortgage space has. It seems like there's acronyms on top of acronyms. And so and that is one of the first things that I realized. And I would say that, coming from a world in which it seemed like every day there was something new or something that you're competing with or a new way of doing things into a world in which the business has been booming for years and years and years. And certainly when an industry is booming and you don't want to think about changing it up or doing anything differently. And so over the last decade or so, as the mortgage industry has been booming, sometimes you start to lag in changing or innovating in the ways that you do things. And so when we got through the COVID boom and interest rates started to rise, business started to slow down, which is when I really got involved in this space, which I think is a perfect time to really truly understand what a industry is doing and learn. I find, I think that everywhere I look, there's been opportunities to think, okay, this is something, a system or process or strategy that has been in place for a long time, and now is it time for us to think about, is there a better way of doing things? When things are booming, no one cares about doing them differently. But I think once you get to a point to where things start to slow down, you're really kind of pressed with, all right, we need to think about how we can create efficiency, add more value, do things a little bit differently, which is exciting about, I think, the time that we've been in over the last couple of years in the mortgage space.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think mortgage has gotten more fun from that cutting edge technology. So, being in the space for 2.5 years, what are some of those opportunities that you can see the mortgage industry picking up in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think, I think it's hard to have a conversation when you talk about technology without mentioning AI.
Yeah.
And predictive AI has been around for a while. I think where we started to gain more speed is around once we started talking generative AI, and then generative AI is now moving into agentic AI, and agentic AI is very quickly going to move into autonomous AI. And what does all that mean, and what impact will it have on the technology landscape? What impact will it have on us as human beings? And, I often think about, for me, my son just turned 16. And prior to him turning 16, I was spending most of my time moving my kids from place to place and just doing very tactically getting from point A to point B. And I didn't have the time to really do more meaningful things. My son's now 16, and even though it's a bit scary that he's free and he's out on the road to do the things that he is doing, it's saving me a ton of time in terms of taking him to his activities or my daughter's activities. So my wife and I both have time to actually prepare dinner and make it intentionally sit down and do some of these things. And so when I think about where technology is really what excites me and scares me at the same time is, if you can think about the technology landscape within the mortgage industry or even more broadly, it is going to free us up as human beings on more of the tactical or transactional type of work that we do, and really spend more time on thinking about the creative things that we do, or how to create better experiences for our home buyers. Everything from beginning to end, I think that will start to really kind of shape the way that we work, and spend more time on the things that we actually really want to do.
That's a really good way to look at it. And I think it's a good way to put it, because I do feel like a lot of people are scared that the technology is going to replace them. And I think you kind of nailed it around the fact that it's not here to replace you. It really does just give you more opportunity to work smarter on, the things that matter. But I need you to back up a little bit, because you said a lot of words and you were talking about all of the different AIs. Will you take a second and kind of break down those different types?
Yeah, so predictive AI, large language models, for a while now has helped us to look at data and kind of predict what that data is going to be able to tell us in the future. And so we've been using that for quite some time. I think what we've seen with ChatGPT in generative AI is it's actually, you can start to prompt it to really look at helping, ChatGPT. You put a prompt in, hey, I want to come up, and my kids use it more than I'd like them to use in terms of helping them through school. But I kind of look at some of the ways that we use AI today as if helping with inspiration. It's,
Mhm.
you want to put your own um, feel and touch in it, but it can help you kind of generate ideas in which you can then mold into your own. Um, Agentic AI is, I think we're moving pretty quickly to a workforce to where we'll have humans and then agents working together in order to accomplish the work that's in front of them. And so the agents, in a lot of ways, will take on a lot of the transactional and tactical type of things, so that the humans can really focus in on on making decisions and doing things that really human needs to do. And then I think what's right around the corner is autonomous AI, and it's where AI is this idea of where AI is going to be able to do the things without being prompted. So they'll be
Mm.
able to learn and understand and see the things that actually they feel like needs to be done and do them without being prompted. And so, um, and truly, once we got to generative AI, it accelerated how quickly we got to the agent piece of it, which is accelerating how we're going to get to the autonomous piece of it. And so, it's in one of the struggles that I see is whether it's in our industry or industries, more broadly speaking, the rest of the technology infrastructure has to catch up in order for us to fully be able to implement and take advantage of AI technology. And
Mhm.
so that's I think what we're kind of seeing now is like, okay, this is accelerated past the point of where we can actually create how to implement it into our overall infrastructure. And so now we need to solve for that.
And I mean, this is where I'm glad you're on because, first of all, thank you for breaking all that down. Um, I know all of the AI and all of the technology has to have compliance departments just going, oh my gosh, what do we do? So, what is compliance looking at when it comes to technology, especially around digital marketing? What exactly are they focused on?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that excited me about getting into the space that I'm in is that it seems like and scares me at the same time. I mean, social media is so invasive into every part of our lives. It's where my kids are on it more than I'd like them to be, and they're learning basically everything that they need to know through TikTok and Instagram and short reels. And so I think, if we think about the home buying experience specifically for the newer home buyers or the younger generations, they live, eat, and breathe on social media. And so, where do we need to meet them where they're at? And so it's important for us to build our brands on social media in order to connect with our home buyers and then be able to then help them through that journey. Um, and so I think that the compliance teams are focused in because the regulators are focused in on making sure that we're connecting with the home buyers in a way in which is not deceptive. It's not putting, it's not creating issues for any segment of the home buyer experience. And so, are we saying things that can help to get us more views, but are against any of the regulations that were out there? And so, I think compliance teams are looking for a way in which they can protect their organizations, protect their sellers, but
Mhm.
also give them the autonomy to make sure that they're branding themselves in a way in which is compliant, but it also differentiates them from the other folks they're competing against on the market.
For sure. And I mean, I don't I hate calling compliance like a creative killer, but I know that that kind of turns into a battle between creativity and the rules. So how do we strike a balance between, ensuring that we are compliant and making sure that we are being creative and getting to the customer first and saying fun things? And I mean, how do you balance it?
Yeah, I think that as we think about continuing to create better home buyer experience, we also have to think about how we can make it easier for our sellers to communicate with home buyers. There's obviously in this space, it's highly regulated. And so compliance is just part of the DNA in which we have to follow. But I think that there's ways in which we continue to educate our loan officers to make sure that they're aware of the things that they can do and they can't do. And sometimes I think the way that we educate can be tedious, or you have a resistance to wanting to be educated on it. But if we are able to communicate and give the educational pieces in a way that's digestible for our sellers. And then compliance just kind of works in the background. The more the education that we give in a way in which they can consume it, and then we've got the guardrails of technology in place to make sure that they're catching things or helping LOs understand, okay, we can't say this or we can't do that. And then moving forward, I think that will help to make sure that we have that time to be more creative.
Mhm.
One of the interesting things that I've seen as well is, I'm in my 50s. I didn't grow up on social media, and
Mhm.
it is a little scary for me to even figure out how I can get started in social media. And then when I think about if I say something wrong or I do something wrong, am I going to get in trouble for that? And I think a lot of the population that we see, our community of LOs, maybe in my generation of folks where we didn't grow up on social media. We understand that we need to adopt it, and there's a big opportunity for us to connect with home buyers if we do it, but
Mhm.
that we're also have this resistance and scared of the fact that we may say or do something wrong. And so I think education and understanding that there are safeguards in place will help with people starting to adopt using social media to help market themselves.
And let's talk about that a little bit. I mean, there is some automation, some safeguards that compliance departments use. ActiveComply is one of them. How are compliance teams leveraging automation and technology to, kind of help keep our sales teams and everybody else within those safeguards?
Yeah, I think typically my experience has been, and I know it's a kind of a down market when I came in, is operational teams in general are in a lot of cases understaffed and overworked, and so where I see friction points are with things need to get approved, and then it takes time because it's a manual approval process. And then you've kind of missed your opportunity with things as dynamic as they are in our industry. And then you have frustration from an LO perspective of like, hey, look, I'm trying to follow the process, but the process takes too long. So what do I do? And so I think there's a great opportunity to create more efficiency for teams that are smaller, and efficiency will come through, automating some of the process in order to get the sellers what they need in a time frame that makes sense and make sure that they capitalize on those opportunities. And so when I look at what ActiveComply does and what we do in general, it's helping compliance team use technology to make sure that they're um, able to understand what risks are out there and hone in on those risks, get them through a workflow, get corrective action taken care of in a timely manner that won't impact the sellers from their ability to go out and sell.
That's awesome. So you touched on ActiveComply. Tell everybody, I know you kind of touched a little bit on what y'all do, but like tell us about ActiveComply. Who are you? What do you do? How do lenders work with you?
Yeah, so I think we've got kind of a cool story. Our two founders, one of which was a long-term mortgage person, had owned a IMB for several years, and I think at the coming out of the 2008, 2009, I think he realized the opportunity to market was no longer on commercials or billboards. In large part, that there was a huge opportunity to market through social media. And so he aggressively had his sales teams go out and use social media to market, but very quickly realized that there were regulations on what you could and could not say. And so he went out and realized that in order to use this as a way to market, he needed a way in which he could make sure that his sellers were not getting themselves or his company into trouble, and saw that there was an opportunity. There wasn't a lot of different types of solutions in the market. And so his neighbor was an engineer, and over beers, I think, had said, hey, can you develop something that would allow me to monitor my sellers all over the country, make sure that they can post and that they can mark themselves on social media, but do it in a way in which I'm not going to get fined or get in trouble for. And so that's how we came to be probably 4 or 5 years ago, realized that through his use case, there was going to be value for the industry at whole within the IMB space, credit unions and banks. And so that's how we started to grow. And I think over time, what we've realized through this space that there are other marketing compliance areas in which we could really help our compliance teams and marketing teams that we support create more efficiencies through adding technology to make sure that they're keeping their organizations compliant. And so that's kind of how we got started.
I love that. And I mean, I have to ask, because I'm sure you guys see a ton of wild social media posts. What are some common mistakes that you see sales teams do over and over?
So, if you kind of think about your own experience on social media, and if you think about if you're on Facebook or some of these different social sites where you're like, oh, wow, I can't believe they said that, or why would they post that? We see a lot of that from a professional perspective as well. I think that in a world in which you're trying to get views and clicks, sometimes it's taken out of like you kind of cross that line, and so I think that and it draws into question common sense in some cases, given what's going on politically and what has gone on, with last year being an election year and all of the dynamics there. Over the last year, we've seen a lot of political posts that typically an organization would not want to associate their brand with. We see things like, if you're having a webinar and a loan officer, that you may try to highlight it to get those views. We've seen titles like mortgages, meth, and marijuana. Please come attend our webinar at 1 p.m. on such and such date. And so, those are more brand versus any particular regulation. But, and then we see things like lowest rates guaranteed, which is a clear violation, and different things like that. So it's interesting, and when we find these things and take them in, and again, I think it's a lot around just educating your LOs on where the guardrails need to lie.
I really just want to know if people attended that webinar. That's what I really would like to know.
Right. I know. Me too.
Yes, I mean, I've seen a lot of the political posts too. I think, I think you kind of said it when, a lot of the, not a lot, well, most of the mortgage bankers or loan officers and real estate agents are a little older where they didn't grow up with social. And sometimes we forget that like whatever you put on social it's there. Like that's who you are. That's what you said. It's not going anywhere. We have to remind people of that sometimes too. Well, thanks for sharing some funny stories. Well, I mean, how are Utah's politics? And I know, DC has been a hot mess this year. But how are the regulators influencing the way that compliance is evaluating technology, especially when it comes to creating these efficiencies? Because when you said it, I mean, I know I've said it many times, is like, well, it's too slow. So everyone moves on and then we're not following the rules. And then it's just a hot mess altogether. So, I mean, what's going on as far as regulation and in the compliance space?
Yeah, so I think with what you mentioned in DC, that there's been a lot of conversation in terms of the CFPB is not going to be as actively involved in this in the mortgage space, and so in one sense you kind of have a sigh. Okay, I don't have as much to worry about, but from my understanding, what happens in these type of cycles when you get a new administration and their focus areas are different, it's not at the federal level. That just puts it more on the state level, which is sometimes more scary. I mean, the CFPB is like the great white shark. But when the states typically are getting more involved and they step up, and that to me creates more complexity because each state's a little bit different. and what they're focusing on in exams can be a little bit different. We start to see trends and what different states are kind of focusing in on as concerns. We're starting to see with this new cycle what some of those trends are, and they seem to, at least in my experience over the last 2.5 years, um, it's really hard to understand what's going to be the majority or what are the main concerns, at least in the space and what I see. I know social media becomes more and more a topic and a part of each exam, regardless of the state that is coming in to do the exam. And so they're getting smarter about the way that they look at social media and marketing and understanding what's being posted and if there's any violation or potential concern around that.
Mhm. Well, I mean, looking forward into, 2026, 2027, what are you most excited about? What excites you about where the industry is headed?
I'm excited to experience something that's not on the downturn. I mean, I keep waiting. I mean, I got in when it was on a downturn, which was great because I've learned a lot. But for the love of God, can we just swing up? And I want to experience that. I'm used to being in kind of the growth kind of mindset, and so I'm excited about seeing what that looks like. I also feel like I think what we've learned over the last couple of years, and I've been to a ton of different conferences. I was at the Mortgage Innovator conference out in California a few weeks ago. I see such a willingness for this entire industry to really kind of lean into what can we do now to better prepare ourselves so that when the shit does hit the fan and the world does start to move back into an upcycle, like how we can move so much faster, we can create better experiences. We're not going to have to where people are working as hard as they have, I guess, in the ways that they have, because we have more of the modern day way of doing things. And so I'm excited to see that play out. I think as a lot of us in this industry, it's like, let's just see the interest rates drop a little bit, and then we can fully accelerate and take the practices and the things that we've learned in a down market and apply them to when the world starts to turn in the other direction. So that's exciting for me to see and to be a part of.
I'm excited for that too. I think a lot of people are
Yeah.
are also excited for that. Well, I can't really let you leave without asking our final question. We ask all of our guests the same question, and you can take it whichever way you want to take it. But how are you going to lend it forward for the second half of the year?
Yeah. So, I often think about whatever I'm doing professionally, I want to make sure that it is what I'm doing from a value perspective. I'm conducting myself personally, then I'm setting the right example for the people that are in my world, whether it's my kids or my nephews and things like that. And so I think oftentimes what I find is in a world that's moving very fast and there's lots of different dynamics, it creates anxiety and chaos. And sometimes you just got to take a step back and create um, world that not allow it to get so complicated. And so I kind of try to live my life and set an example of when it boils down to three different areas. And it's, try to do what's right. And so that's kind of an aspirational thing. But if I kind of look at cutting through all of the noise, I'm just doing what's right, what is ethical and makes sense, both personally and professionally. Do what works. And so that's one in which, like, don't overcomplicate the world. Just kind of like get to what works, and what works, and don't try to recreate things to do them differently if you've got something that works. And then I think that the world needs more kindness. I think if we kind of operate in a way in which we, do what works, do what's right, and we do it in a way in which has a sense of kindness, then then we're pretty well off. And so, I try to really lean into those three areas. And if I set that example for the people I work with, my kids and the people in my personal life, that's kind of what I think when you ask me that question, what kind of hits home for me.
That was such a good answer. It really was. That was a great answer. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, Colby. I think you're a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate you kind of taking the time to explain all of the different AIs and what's going on in the, digital marketing compliance world. So thanks.
Well, thank you for having me. And this isn't something that I have done, and trying to get out there a little bit more and be a little bit more active, whether it be on social media or doing something like this. And so you've been great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the Lending Forward podcast. Be sure to subscribe to our channel, follow us on Instagram @LendingForward, on YouTube and LinkedIn. Catch us every other Thursday with a brand new episode, and go lend something forward today. Atlantic Bay Mortgage Group, LLC, NMLS number 72043, NMLSconsumeraccess.org is an equal opportunity lender and employer. Located at 600 Lynn Haven Parkway, Suite 100, Virginia Beach, Virginia 23452.